We're presenting a budget which deals with the challenges and focuses on the priorities that the residents of Cornwall have told us they want to see. Our new overarching mission is set out in the business plan, and it commits the council to working with communities for a carbon neutral Cornwall, where everyone can start well, live well and age well. This will give further emphasis to the work we're already doing as a council on becoming carbon neutral and on tackling the inequalities that exist in our society so that everyone can live a good life in Cornwall. We're underpinning the mission for our 4 priorities that we want to make as a difference to Cornwall, and that is a brilliant place to be a child and grow up, in a thriving, sustainable Cornwall that offers a secure home, a decent income and a great environment for all. And we want to be a warm and vibrant, safe, supportive communities where people help each other to live well. And this is all going to be supported by an empowering and enterprising council that offers a consistent, excellent customer experience and obviously providing great value for money. So I'm now going to hand over, and I think if I've got the presentations right, I'm now going to be handing over to David, and we're hoping that this is going to be a slick presentation tonight, but I'm going to prepare you that it might not always go according to plan, but yes, it's definitely handing over to David. Thank you.
Well, that's put the markers on me for a start. Thanks very much. All right, budgets and business plans. Next slide. Come on, Dirk. There we are. It's an annual event. The way the system works is we have an all-member briefing which previews the budget proposals. The budget proposals in draft go to a cabinet meeting in December. As soon as that's finished, we launch into consultation and engagement. In mid-December, there's a timing mismatch here. We then find out how much central government are going to give us and go, in this case, well, that's not too bad. In other years, it's been, oh, whoops. We then come on to today, the stakeholder consultation event. There's a reference on this slide to overview and scrutiny committees. Some of you will know what they are, some of you won't. So I'll just spend a minute on that. Within the council structure, there are these committees which are all made up of members. Cabinet members cannot sit on them. In other words, they're all, in Westminster terms, backbenchers. And they actually do what it says in the tin. They overview what goes on and they scrutinise it. So the budgets for the relevant committees like health and adult social care, their budgets will go to that scrutiny committee. We are expecting, indeed, from what I've seen already, some good pushback from these committees in terms of our proposals, etc. We go on, we consult, we listen. The final scrutiny committee is the customer and support services that brings everything together. We then go back to the members to review our proposals, which may have changed, but hopefully not too much. We then hope, as I say, it's all hopeful is this, Cabinet will approve the budget on the 9th of February, and it goes to full council on the 22nd of February for formal approval. The council budget is a full council matter, it's on a Cabinet matter. Moving on. Dirk, you're slow. I already talked about consultation and engagement. There's a line on this slide which talks about savings, and we'll come on to savings as I go through this, but in no detail. There's a huge amount of savings proposed. There is something called an online dashboard, which any of you can find, but I have a feeling it would be helpful, Dirk, if you could send a note out to people after this of exactly how they find it. But if you click on a link in certain papers, you'll find an online dashboard which will actually break down all the savings that are being proposed almost line by line, and you can see where they are, you can see whether they need public consultation, etc. So for those of you who are interested, it's well worth looking at. Moving on, please. Okay, the headline position. I need to catch up with my notes as well. I apologise. Page 6. this is a hugely complex budget. It's £1 billion budget. Financial sustainability is a real problem. We've got growth in demand, in particular in adult social care, and I make no excuses for coming back to adult social care. Homelessness, children's care. There's a new waste contract coming out, which we hope will encourage more recycling. Now, the key point on this slide, we're having to invest £45 million into adult social care expenditure just to stand still. The growth forecast for future years is literally unaffordable. So we have to look at demand reduction strategies. I'm not an adult social care expert. Councillor Ver is the expert on this. And if you hear him speak, he's brilliant, because he talks about making sure that reducing demand isn't, I don't know, putting people out to grass or something. It's ensuring that they've got the best place to recover, which is in their own home, not in a hospital bed and not in a care home. Because once you get into a care home, it's difficult to get out. So this is one of the things they are trying to drive. Other points we're making here, one of the key things in Cornwall is housing. And we are making significant investment in housing and trying to bring the right sort of housing forward. If we can jump on to the next slide, Cornwall's business plan. And I'll shut up for a minute, thankfully, and let Linda speak about our actual business plan and some of the words that underline that come before the numbers. Linda, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm not going to apologise for repeating our 4 priorities. These are phrases that we're incredibly comfortable with and we're proud about. And how we got to these 4 incredible priorities was back to basics for us. And that's when we were out canvassing for the elections last year. And obviously we spent an awful lot of time talking to our residents. We did surveys, we did telephone calls. We absolutely wanted to understand what our residents expected from hopefully a new administration, and they told us in no uncertain terms. And them talking to us and us collecting all the information absolutely defined the 4 priorities for us, and that was a brilliant place to grow, to be a child and to grow up, and being able to offer that secure home, a decent income, and a great environment for all. And I don't think I need to emphasise the fact that a secure home is incredibly important to so many residents in Cornwall. And we've seen now how important it is that we've absolutely got to start addressing those issues. Also, we wanted, our communities were telling us they wanted a vibrant, they wanted a safe, and they wanted a supportive community. Now, I don't need to say to you, because you're all engaged here with your own community, how our communities absolutely came together to make sure that they were safe and that people within our own communities had that support, especially and more importantly during COVID. And we absolutely want to capture that essence and absolutely build on it in delivering this vibrant and safe, supportive community for everybody in Cornwall, because unfortunately not everyone gets the benefit of having that support. And then finally, we want to be able to be an empowering and enterprising council that delivers great value for money. For me, every pound we've got has to work for the benefit of our residents in Cornwall, and this is what this budget is all about. David?
Excellent. You want to move on, Dirk?
I'm happy to. Am I on this one as well? Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, you've got anything with words on, Linda, is yours.
Thank you, David. So it was important that not only did we listen to our residents, but we absolutely needed to engage with our stakeholders in understanding how we were going to be delivering a budget that we were proud of, and it was going to give value for money, and at the same time really identified the issues that we needed to address. And as David says, we're responsible for over £1 billion, and those £1 billion have to provide the public services for you, your family and for your friends every day. And they range once again from that best start in life for children and young people, and also through to providing adult social care. And one of our other mantras that I am not ashamed to be using all the time is, David referred to Andy via our portfolio holder. You know, what we're saying is there is no place like home, and we absolutely want to do everything we can within Cornwall to make sure that that home is the safest place for our residents when it's safe for them to be discharged from hospital or from a home back into their own home. And we want to make sure that this is their utopia, really, that they have that comfort, and we're doing everything we can to assist in using the community, using our resources to make sure that we're looking after our elderly residents in Cornwall. So I'm just seeing if I've missed anything else. It's just the focus on our 4 priorities. Why have I got draft to be considered by children and families in 2021?
Do you want me to comment on that, Linda?
Yes, I'll get you to come in on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. For our 4 key priorities, we've set down sub priorities. On the right of the screen there, what you are seeing is what is going to, in this case, the Children's Scrutiny Committee, Children and Family Scrutiny Committee. And this is a list of the benchmarks that they will be putting in place through which they will hold Cabinet, Council, officers to account. So obviously we don't dictate those, we'll put up suggestions, but the key thing here is the Scrutiny Committee, where, you know, some people might know a lot more than certainly I know about stuff like this, will look at sensible benchmarks against which we can be measured. This is one of the key things here. It's all right coming out with waffle and target. We need benchmarks to be measured against, and that's what we're putting in place here. I'm going to move on. Just speaking of the wider context, and a lot of these slides speak for themselves. They're great. I didn't put them together. You know, a number of we talk about being short of money and having budget gaps. A number of councils across the UK, or across England and Wales, I think to be more precise, have been submitting Section 114 notices, which are effectively, a council can't go bankrupt, but it can throw its hands in the air and say, help, we're in a mess. That's what's happened. The pandemic will be felt on local government finances for some time to come. In the current year, we've got a 6 million gap in terms of what we've had to spend on COVID-related expenditure over and above the very significant grants we've had from Westminster, obviously this year and last year, but there's still a 6 million gap we've had to fund from Cornwall resources. Talking about future funding for local government, there isn't a slide here, and Tracy can perhaps comment in a second about where our revenue comes from. You know, a lot of our revenue does come from London or Westminster, call it what you will, the chaps up the road. We had the announcement in December of additional monies coming in for next year. What we didn't get in December was any sort of indication as to what we would get over the next 3 years, which is a lot, would make our planning a lot easier. I wish this slide would stop jumping about. We're also talking about funding reforms. The bottom line here is funding reforms. All of you, I'm sure, will have heard talk of fairer funding and Cornwall needing fairer funding. And it is very evident to see, even to somebody like me, that if you look, the rural councils in particular, and Cornwall in particular, have done less well on a pro rata basis than some of the big urban councils. Now, we've been promised fairer funding. We are tweaking, I'll use that word, tweaking our MPs to get this moving, but there's still no indication of when it will really come in. I mean, we've done quite reasonably in next year's financial settlement, and we'll come on to that in a second. If you want to move on. Budget planning principles. The key point here is our revenue spending must be funded by recurring income. We can't be looking to fund it from one-offs, from capital receipts. There are financial rules saying we can't fund it from capital receipts. We have to look at the key areas that are residents' priorities. No more, I use the expression wishy-washy, I shouldn't. No more wishy-washy stuff. There are key areas that are the residents' priorities that are identified in our business plan, and that's what we must target. The general fund reserve that's referred to on here, this is the rainy day fund. If you imagine we've got a £650 million revenue budget, an overall budget of £1 billion, then obviously it's right to keep something in the back pocket. The general fund reserve is set by Tracy as our section 151 officer. It's currently set at £40 million, and it's actually a very scientific setting. It isn't a figure plucked out of thin air. What Tracy does is looks at all sorts of risks and then sets a percentage grade on them as to how likely they are to happen. So if you imagine, the risk of County Hall falling down, hallelujah, but I didn't say that. It's a huge cost, but it's a 0.002 percentage risk when it comes to it. But all those figures add up to get to that £40 million. That's the one that, if something weird and wonderful crops up in next year that we didn't see coming in the budget, and it almost certainly will, that's the one we have to dip into, but then top up again. If you want to move on, budget assumptions, I think this has probably been fairly well trailed. We are proposing a 2.99% overall increase in council tax. That's the maximum we can propose without going to council taxpayers in a referendum. Business rates pilot. If somebody wants to ask a question about that, please do, and Tracy will answer it. Government funding reforms, I've already spoken about. We are desperate to get something in place longer term, and the fair funding review dealt with. We have got continuing pressure on pay and inflation. Inflation quite possibly is going to be above what we are predicting in the current budget. That is a real worry. Demand growth, adult social care, children's, homelessness. What we've assumed in the budget came from the Chancellor's autumn statement. In fact, now we got a little bit more, and I think if we move on to the next slide, it might even comment on that. No, it doesn't. There we go. It must be further on. I love this slide because Tracy Langley, our chief accountant, the one who gets miserable with the money, even more miserable than me, put the heading on it. Budget is an art, not a science. That isn't what you expect to hear from your chief accountant, but it's probably true. And what we look at here is some of the problems we have. We've got an 80. If we don't do anything, in 4 years' time, Cornwall Council will be running at an £80 million deficit. Councils are unable by law to run at a deficit. We have to produce a balanced budget, unlike other parts of the government. I guess the NHS is probably one of those, but I'm not asking for any grief on that one this evening. We've got some very specific problems within Cornwall. If you look at the construction market, raw materials are difficult to obtain. They're also more expensive. Labour, straightforward labour is difficult to obtain in Cornwall. Qualified tradespeople, etc. The comment here is hybrid working. I'd still love to see a brickie doing hybrid working from home. That's a different matter. But we have real problems, and I've seen this within Cornwall Council and elsewhere about recruiting social workers, legal staff. I've seen it in education, and here it's caused not so much by a lack of people wanting to come and work in Cornwall. I've heard 2 or 3 stories of schools recruiting teachers, the teacher coming down to look for a house and taking one look and saying, I can't afford that. Housing is a quite separate problem we have in Cornwall, and thankfully not the subject of tonight's discussions. Do you want to move on to where we've got to next? Investment proposals. These tie back in with the business plan, and there's more words than numbers here, so I will quietly pass the ball back to Linda, if I may.
Thank you. David, we seem to be working quite well at this moment in time. It's a bit of a double act, and we haven't actually practiced this.
Well,
okay,
I'll screw it up in a minute.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going back to our 4 key priorities here. The brilliant place to be a child and to grow up. And so if you can see from the slide, we're going to be investing 93 million to provide 550 new school places and repair school buildings. And I think for a lot of you who travel around the schools around Cornwall, that is money that was needed yesterday as opposed to today, and we're absolutely grateful we're going to be having that money to spend. In relation to a thriving and sustainable Cornwall, we're going to be investing in the future with just over £1 billion to support economic growth projects that create homes and jobs for local people and roll out a new waste service. Now, the new waste service in itself, we're working hard to make sure that when we do deliver that, and there is going to be a bit of a delay on that, I'm going to be upfront with you, but we're going to make sure that when we do deliver it out, it is absolutely going to work. And I'm going to take this opportunity to slightly deviate with all the people that absolutely help contribute to making sure that our services are delivered in Cornwall. I'm going to do a bit of a shout out for our waste disposal gentlemen and women, because all over Christmas and the New Year, I don't think anybody noticed any change in how that our waste was collected. And I just want to say thank you for them, because week in, week out, they I can see thumbs up as well from some of our participating audience. So I'm going to make sure our chief executive passes on the call out that we're putting here tonight in relation to the collection of our rubbish. So thank you, everyone. But that is really important. It's one of those important things that matter to our residents about their waste. But it's also important that as we move forward with our new waste contract, we absolutely focus on making sure everybody joins in increasing our recycling, because that is going to be a really important element of making Cornwall a better sustainable place to live. So going back to the vibrant and safe supportive communities, we're going to be investing in the future up to 29 million for projects, including providing our communities with a warm, dry and efficient homes, and investment in our fire and rescue service through targeted appliance replacement programs. And this is where David and I need to be going back to our government to make sure that we get more money in that investment for our safe and vibrant communities. And then an empowering and enterprising council. We're going to be investing in the future with 54 million for projects that include investment in new technology to put the council at the forefront of modern, flexible, low carbon ways of working and maintaining and transforming our office estate. Thank you, David. Back to you.
Thank you. A couple of comments. You mentioned the waste. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, my Christmas tree actually hasn't been picked up. So they right now they're teetering on the edge as to whether they picked up my Christmas tree or not. Just another comment on your very final words there, Linda. And this is just for information for people. You talked about transforming our office estate. Cornwall Council's office estate, or Cornwall Council's property estate, has over the years grown like topsy. And one of the things we are looking at, and it also falls in my portfolio, is rationalising buildings, offices. This also ties back into hybrid working, etc. But now let's move on to this next slide. I'm almost tempted to say, you read it and tell me what it means. But that's very unfair. What it seeks to do is just let you see the sort of pressures we have. Working from the left is the net budget approved for this year. That's 600.9 million. You then adjust it for reserve transfers within that, because fiddling with reserves you should take out is the best way of putting it, but I shouldn't use the word fiddling. Then you look at what's gone on looking forward to next year. we've got pay-related pressures, we've got contractual inflation. The line that says budget right sizing, this really is increased demand in adult social care in particular. You know, £60 million relates to adult social care. We've got unavoidable demand pressures. Homelessness is one of them. We get some grants from London, but there are a lot of pressures in there. And then to the right in the grey is where we are finding the money to pay for this, and it is coming from savings, savings across the board. You know, I'm sure you've all seen the council is looking at a limited voluntary redundancy programme. You know, and Kate and Tracy and the senior officers I know are working hard on this, which must be a rotten job to have to do. You know, I'm glad I'm not doing it. So that's that slide, and it's taken me about 8 efforts to be able to, I think, explain it in a reasonable form. And if I haven't done, ask me when I've finished. I'm going to move on just to the last slide. Budget gap. When we prepared these budgets, and it was approved in draft at Cabinet last month, there was a £1.8 million gap. I think the financial settlement we actually got in the middle of December from London suggests that we will be able to close that gap, but there'll be nothing spare. You know, we already have increased costs coming into next year that we did not expect. Increased inflation is a key one. You know, that is a real worry across the board. Unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, you know, that isn't something we put in the budget, but that's going to cost us money very well spent, I hasten to add. You know, but these are the sort of pressures that crop up. So what as a council we're looking at is getting a much tighter control over budget, and something that's bugged me. I've only been a councillor for just over 4 years, and one of the things that was driving me crazy when I first started was the fact you get financial information so far down the line that you were saying, well, it's meaningless. We had a big meeting this morning to discuss how we set strategies, how we set targets, go back to some of the things that the overview and scrutiny committees are talking about, and how we get reporting on that in real time so we can actually see where we're going and take corrective action if necessary. I think there's one more slide to talk about, which I will not talk about at all. This is an example of the online dashboard. And Dirk, as I say, if you can send people a little note to explain how they get into these things, or whatever, but it does sort of give you a really interesting feel. You can click on the different boxes on the top there if you can see it, and you probably can hardly see it. Type of financial benefit, the directorate, that's the different parts of the council, which parts of the council's priority a saving is in, whether public consultation is required, and then down in the text, you can see the council priority, what the saving, the amount of the saving, and how it's proposed to obtain it. I hate to end up on savings because there's a lot of good news in these budgets in terms of delivering our priorities as we believe we've understood them from the people of Cornwall. I'll be delighted to take questions, but I'm sure Tracy and Kate and Linda would be as well. Thank you.
So I think I would just like to finish before we open it up by saying that, you know, the demand for our services, they continue to grow. And this is partly because we've got a growing population and people are living longer, and we're thankful for that. And our services need to respond to that change in our population growth. And so one of the things that we need to do is we've got to be protecting our frontline services. And this is where we are having to make savings where possible in reducing the size of our organisation and delivering the services in a more different, but in a more effective way. So I can see Kate nodding, so hopefully that touched the right phrase with her. And as David said, there's 4 of us here. We're very brave. We're absolutely now open for people to put their hands up and ask their questions. So if you're not familiar, hopefully across the top of the bar you'll see where you can click on a yellow hand, and if you click on that I'll be able to see exactly who wants to ask questions. If you've taken your camera off, there's no point waving to me, so I can't see you. So you're going to have to put your camera on and wave to me, and if I see anyone waving, I'll bring them in that way. So this is your opportunity, and we'll do our absolute best to answer those questions.
Wonderful.
Lovely. So Millie from Tall Point, good evening and thank you for coming. Oh, I can see you, Millie. Lovely as well. So can we have your question, please?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm the town clerk for Tall Point Town Council. I wear various other hats as well. I'm a vice chair of governors and I'm also a trustee of a charity. So I just wanted to join. I wanted to say thank you to you all. My question is actually a bit of a local question. I apologise for that in advance, but I want to reflect on David's comments about the fairer funding from the government. Because Tall Point was very successful. We received £50,000 of vitality funding, and we're working on a strategic outline case to look at the redevelopment of Lower 4th Street. We hosted a visit of portfolio holders, including yourself, David, virtually. So I suppose my question is, do you know when the government's going to announce when the fairer funding is going to come through? And it is a local question because obviously I'm looking to Cornwall Council to help seek, funding for next stage of our development.
I think there's probably about 3 different people can answer this question. I think in terms of fairer funding, that's some way away. Millie, if I remember what you were looking at, though, it isn't so much fairer funding because there was some pretty big capital asks in there as well, weren't there?
Certainly, David, definitely, yeah. We're looking to submit the whole case to you, and then the idea is that we would look at pockets of that, as funding became available.
Yeah, but it isn't really you shouldn't be looking at fairer funding on this one. It's where we can find money, and more to the point, where we can drag money in from elsewhere. I don't, Tracy, have you got any knowledge of this in terms of? Oh, Kate's got a hand up.
Kate's got a hand up.
Hi, Millie. Nice to meet you.
And Kate.
Yeah, I've been doing some great work in Tall Point, and we are excited by the opportunities around redeveloping that part of the town because it's a great asset that is underdeveloped, I think, kind of at the moment. So I think that some of the things that we want to make sure that our business plan supports us with is working with places that have got the right ideas of how to regenerate their areas to meet the needs of local people and local businesses, and to target and work with accessing government funds. And I think the key funds that we need to be looking at is the next phase of the Levelling Up Fund, and where the Tall Point scheme sits as a priority within South East Cornwall as a whole. Okay. We're working very closely with the government on the Levelling Up agenda, and the white paper for Levelling Up, we understand, is going to be published at the end of this month, and there will be areas that are going to be identified for county deals, and we're very hopeful that Cornwall will be one of those early areas for county deals. Now, that's unlikely to have a line that says money for Lower 4th Street in Tall Point. No, yeah. But what it will have is an opportunity for us to work with government to find out where those different funding pots are that we can tap into. I think the other area that for your council to keep an eye out on is the Shared Prosperity Fund. The Chancellor's autumn budget statement made a clear commitment to funds being made available to Cornwall. But what we're waiting to hear, and we think it will be linked to this Levelling Up white paper, is going to be the mechanism through which that those funds come to Cornwall. So I think, in a few months' time, Millie, if you were to be inviting council officers back round for a look round Tall Point, we might be in a place to be a bit clearer together about how we can go and bring some of these schemes into reality. Hope that answers your question.
Lovely, thank you. I think it is all about partnership working, and I apologise for bringing a local question in, But you know, that's why I've joined this evening. So thank you, and I look forward to meeting you again, Tracy, on Thursday, because you're talking to us all clerks.
We are.
And,
Sorry, I think Millie, I think bringing a local question in actually is quite interesting, because it actually gives people a feel of how it works across Cornwall. It might have been a local question, but in terms of the general response, that covers the whole of Cornwall. So don't worry about that at all.
And the other thing I was going to say, Millie, is that for Cornwall to be successful, it has to be about partnership working. It has to be about the community working together to make Cornwall that lovely place that we know should be there for everybody. Right, so Robin, your hand's gone up. So good evening to you. And oh, lovely, I can see you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Robin. And what's your question, please?
Right. Okay. So I should say I'm here wearing my hat as chair of the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Local Nature Partnership, and thank you for this evening. A really good initiative, and I'm totally sympathetic with my various hats on with the challenges that you have, obviously, with the budget, given the difficult situation that we have in the nation generally. It's two things really, Linda, if I could. One is I was very pleased that John Bestin's motion on declaring a biodiversity emergency or ecological emergency went through the council recently. Congratulations to John on that. So the general question there is, you quite rightly highly focus on the net zero side. Congratulations on that. It's really important. But maybe over the next 5 years or whatever your planning period is, 4 years, I guess, then how does the council see the more natural environment coming in, and that particular objective being met more? So that's a rather general question. The more specific one is something that as a local nature partnership we've been looking at, which is really important around the area of environment and quality of life and all of that sort of side. And that is making sure we have a lot of development going on in Cornwall, and we need even more, is how we make sure that that developers, and I have an interest in that, I have a role in that area myself, but from that even more important, that developers stick to conditions in terms of planning and development, making sure that compliance happens, and if not, then enforcement. And I'm hoping that budget area is not being squeezed too much. I think when I was a councillor some time ago, one of the things that people got most annoyed about was people getting away with not doing their planning conditions. They felt they cheated, and on the bigger developments, getting that compliance right means that we have healthy environments in those development areas for the long term, and that's even more of a challenge with the government's Environment Act, which I fully welcome in terms of biodiversity net gain, which is going to require probably, I don't know, a lot more care in terms of compliance than current planning systems. So it's around that area as well. Thanks very much.
Right. Robin, I'm going to attempt to start answering your question. So I think the main one is that as we're making decisions as a cabinet and as we're making decisions as a council, we have the decision wheel, and that wheel absolutely reflects our commitments, especially in relation to the impact of our decision on our environment. So that is a very clear tool for us to use. Now, I don't know what's going to be happening to the planning white paper, but part of that planning white paper was the ability to have a more robust enforcement. So I want to be honest with you, some of the biggest complaints that we do get from residents is the very issue that you've raised over enforcement, but we've got to work with it. It's got to, and Kate's going to come in, and it's got to be with peer pressure. But one of the things that is going to be, you know, our testament to where we're going in the future has to be in relation to Langgarth, and it has to be the commitment that we're going to be having with our partners and developers into that quality build and to the impact on that development into the environment. and what it's doing. And don't forget as well, Robin, that everything we do will have to come back to that decision wheel. And I think for us as a council, where we're all working together, and I have to bring politics into this, Robin, but this is one where we're united. You know, when we're coming up with a good initiative, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, the council as a whole are absolutely united in wanting to make sure that as we deliver things, Cornwall at a heart is going to be there for the next 200, 300, 4,000 years, because we're taking the right decisions now. I'm going to hand over to Kate, because Kate put her hand up. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, and nice to see you, Robin, and thank you for the work that you've done on the Local Nature Partnership. A couple of comments just tying back your question through to this budgetary process. So the first thing to say is that one of the 4 priority outcomes is for a thriving and sustainable Cornwall. And what that means is that we are bringing together more closely our work on functions that are previously sat in economic kind of growth and housing and transport, alongside our environmental partnerships and our work on nature recovery and on climate change under that one outcome. And that's because we have adopted, as Linda says, the decision wheel, and have taken an approach based on Kate Raworth's donut economics, as you know, where we need to consider kind of planetary health alongside population health measures, and make sure we've got that balanced approach. So my first comment is that actually the new priority outcome means that we will not be approaching the built environment separately from thinking around what's happening in the natural environment in terms of our work. In terms of the declaration of the ecological emergency at the last full council, well, that is building on some of the work we've done to date on the environmental growth strategy. We're pleased that we're one of the nature recovery area pilots, but we've got work to do during this year on the adopting of our nature recovery strategy and working with government around funds around that, and we will then be able to link those priorities that come from that under the thriving and sustainable Cornwall. And I'd also just direct the fact to, under this priority outcome of a thriving and sustainable Cornwall, over the business plan period, there is a £1 billion capital programme that is linked to this. And I think this is a way in which that we're ensuring that that built environment is kind of working with nature, growing with nature around that, so that, you know, it's not about doing things at the lowest possible price, it's about doing things in a sustainable way. And you made a comment around enforcement. Well, one of the things that having to look at the staffing structures that Linda referred to that we're doing is that we've needed to think about, are there ways in which that we can reduce duplication, fragmentation, and we will be bringing together our regulatory services under a single service area, so that where at the moment we have separate enforcement teams, enforcement team in planning, enforcement team in building control, enforcement team in trading standards, enforcement team in licensing, they will come together in a single service area of regulatory services, so that we can try and get a better bang for our buck and make sure that there aren't those same levels of frustration around there not being some of that right capability and capacity to do enforcement, because that is an important part of our toolkit around making sure that we are protecting Cornwall into the future.
And David, did you want to come in on that one? You've got your hand up.
I did, but the link on, hang on, sorry. We mentioned decision wheel, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with this. It's a magnificent, literally a wheel that's appended to papers that go to various cabinet committees, which has got various blobs in it that you colour different colours to show whether they're good or bad. So I won't read them all out, you know, but climate change adaptation, connectivity, health, renewables, water resources, air quality, they're all in there. So you can see them all and how they all work out. So for those who haven't seen it, that's the decision wheel we're talking about. Otherwise, it just sounds like gobbledygook.
And for anyone who goes on and looks at our agendas for Cabinet and for full council, at the end of every report, that decision wheel is absolutely evident. So Robin, I know you have a busy day, but if you wanted a quick 5 minutes to have a look and see what we're talking about, go and have a look and see what our agendas are now looking like. So have we answered your question for you?
No, no, absolutely, Linda. I think the other thing I just would say, which is obvious and something that you know very well, is that at the end of the day, we don't want to have to enforce things, because if people know they're going to be enforced, they comply, and so it doesn't have to be enforced in the first place. But we don't have a great record on that, or previous council doesn't. So so that's why I think people may be tempted sometimes to be lazy on that. But I'm very happy with that. I'm very pleased with the Kate Drawworth model. It's one of the few economics books I've read since I did economics at university that actually I found a page turner. Very, very, very good. So 10 out of 10 for using that as an economic model. Yeah, no thanks.
I've got it here, look. So Hugh Nelson, you've got your hand up. Hugh, good evening. Oh right, I was just going to ask, could you tell us what you do, but I've got a bit of a hint. So Hugh, could you just mind sharing with us what you do, please?
Yeah, of course. Hello. And thank you all for the presentation this evening. I'm the Bishop of St Germans, so I'm one of the 2 Anglican bishops that look after the Church of England churches across Cornwall. And I'm also, and my question reflects partly that, but also I sit on the board of St Petrox and also of Transformation Cornwall, which works with faith communities and grassroots organisations around social action. And I suppose, I mean, my question, I don't think any of us envy you all the very demanding, very difficult decisions that you've got to make as prices of things go up, incomes are likely to be falling, and as demand for services rises, and you have a really complex set of decisions to make about how you square quite a difficult circle. I suppose my question is, and relating partly to some of the things that you said about finding new ways of doing things, what role you see the voluntary sector, and I'm thinking particularly of St Petrox and Transformation Cornwall, but the full range, that massively creative voluntary sector that Cornwall benefits from, and faith communities, which are different but related, working in clearer, more creative, better, more effective partnership with the council, whether there's any thought to that, whether that makes whether that's any part of your plans.
So Hugh, I'm going to come in first, if I may. I made reference early on in the presentation that COVID showed us how communities can come together, and and it was those communities coming together. For people who live in Cornwall, we know that when you need to pull out all the stops, the residents of Cornwall will be there for you. And I think having all those different voluntary sectors, all those individuals coming out to make sure that the people within their community were safe, that is a situation that we cannot let fall away. We've absolutely got, for me, we've got to embrace working with our communities. The voluntary sector are ideally placed because in their different elements within Cornwall, they know that particular part of the community, and it's incredibly important that we listen to what they're telling us, and we see how we can work together in a partnership to make sure that our communities are safe and they are vibrant and people are feeling very, very comfortable. So Hugh, for me, I'm saying to you, we absolutely need you, and it is important that we keep talking to one another, and we absolutely listen and recognise that there are things that we can do to help you, but more importantly, there are things that you can do to absolutely help us deliver on the services that we need to. And it's not just the services, Hugh, it's making that better way of life for our residents, and it could be something small and it could be something big, but we absolutely need to work together, and I absolutely mean that. And in relation to religion, religion plays an important part in a lot of people's lives. Now, a lot of people will say it's not important to them, but where it is important to those people in the community, we've absolutely got to embrace it and make sure that they've got the ability and that they can embrace their religion and they're comfortable with sharing their beliefs and also, you know, sharing their beliefs with other people in the community, so that somebody else might suddenly listen and think, I might want to take part in this. We've just got to be open and do whatever we can to make all our residents comfortable, happy, and absolutely pleased to be living in Cornwall. And whatever it takes, for me, it's got to happen. Does anyone else want to come in there? Kate?
I absolutely agree with what you've just been saying there, Linda. And I guess the priority outcome in the business plan that I would direct you towards is the vibrant, safe, supportive communities priority outcome. And this is about building on what we've observed in Cornwall for a long time, but seen come to the fore during the pandemic, that actually there's an awful lot of kind of community-based action that has made a real difference in making sure that, you know, people who were shielding had social contact and had support and food, but more than that, we see it in crowdfunding projects, the Forest for Launceston alongside the Forest for Cornwall, all sorts of examples up and down Cornwall. And part of how I want this council to work, with my responsibility as Chief Exec about how we organise ourselves, is to put place first, so that people who work for the council describe what they do in Bude rather than I'm a trading standards officer, and that through taking that place approach, one, we better reflect how people lead their lives, because they don't lead their lives in service directorates, so we make things join up better for the resident, but we're also better able to connect how we work Cornwall Council as part of Team Bude or as part of Team St Just, wherever we need to be working. And I think some of the work that Helen Boardman did in terms of the Voluntary Emergency Response Alliance during COVID, how that's then built into networks, some of the work that came through from the faith groups, identifying particular communities. These are things that, as we work through this business plan under the vibrant, safe, supported communities, we'll want to find more ways within which that we work together around this. So that's our intention. And then we'll have the success measures that sit underneath that. And we're absolutely committed to, over the course of this business plan, regularly reporting back on the progress that we're making through some of those quarterly updates. And we do have, you know, the partnerships through the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Leadership Board, through the executive group, through our different thematic partnerships that puts the voluntary centre stage. And finally, I know we're joined this evening by some colleagues from the NHS who are doing a lot of work at the moment, and we're working closely with them on the integrated care system. And I think we're both jointly committed to the important role of kind of working alongside the voluntary sector in the delivery of health and care as well. So I think as a council, we are agnostic about who should provide services. If it's Cornwall Council, then great. But actually, if there's ways where it's better delivered out by a community group, and we've transferred assets to community groups, we've transferred assets to town and parish councils, we're absolutely up for doing it. It's about what works is what's important to us.
And for me, Hugh, we can't do this on our own. You know, we all need to be working together. So have we answered your question, or did you want to come in with anything else?
No, that's a very positive and helpful response. And if I can say so, I mean, this is your meeting, not ours, but I'm sure you have the Anglican Church's commitment to working similarly in partnership with you across the whole. In fact, I'm meeting some of your colleagues tomorrow to talk about how climate change and biodiversity and how church, which is always in a place, can work more closely with you as council. So yeah, you've answered it well, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Hugh. So I've got Claire Brine now from the NHS. Claire, good evening, and how are you?
Good evening. Thank you, Linda. I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to engage with the council around your budget proposals in this way. I'd quite like to ask a question actually around, it links to housing. I know housing isn't specifically the topic of these proposals, but some of what you've touched on and described around some of the inflationary pressures, the shifts in the labour market, and how that's changed. We've also seen within the health service, and particularly around shrinking in some markets. If I mention home care, for example, has a direct impact on the provision of healthcare in our hospitals, and how easily we can discharge people back to their own homes where they need ongoing packages of care. The question I'd like to ask, I guess, is the sort of how these, because they're quite complex, interrelated issues, aren't they? So what's in my mind is the contraction in some of the labour markets and our limited ability to bring in additional labour, perhaps from out of county, that relates to constraints in the housing market. So certainly during the COVID period, we've tried to bring in out of county workers, but finding places for people to stay and live during the period has been quite difficult. Never more so than during the peak holiday season, because the Weld and his wife decided to come to Cornwall for their holiday this year. So I'm quite keen to understand both aspects, really. One around how we re-stimulate the market, particularly in home care, to sort of try and turn the tide on the contraction of that market, where, you know, perhaps Tesco's is a more appealable employer at the moment, with not dissimilar rates of pay, but a very different type of job. And then how we couple that really with plans to address constraints in the housing market, so that we are able to give our workers places to live, particularly where we're trying to attract more workers from out of county. You referenced teachers, you know, schools recruiting teachers at the beginning of your presentation, David, and so there's probably an overlay of key workers accommodation, particularly, and how we somehow try and protect accommodation to make sure that we've got the workforce that we need to deliver our services. I understand as well as anybody that planning for these things are very complicated and difficult, and making sure that they're affordable is a whole different level of challenge. But I just wondered if you could shed any more light on the council's strategies for those areas, if you like.
Okay, Linda, do you want me to comment on the housing one?
Yeah, I'm going to come in on the housing, and then I'm going to hand over to Tracy or Kate on the health. So just first of all, on the health, Cornwall Council are always running at this moment in time a campaign to recruit for health workers. But one of the things we absolutely recognise, apart from just recruiting, is acknowledging the importance of those workers within Cornwall, and making sure that they understand the pride that we recognise that role will carry within Cornwall and within the workforce. But I'll let Kate come to address that one. Now, housing, Claire, I think that there can't be anybody in Cornwall now, unfortunately, who is not aware of the fact that we have got a housing crisis. And it's been exacerbated by COVID, because COVID has absolutely highlighted the fact that why should you work in somewhere gloomy when you can come and work in beautiful Cornwall and work from your own home and not have to leave your house and travel hundreds of miles. And because of that desirability, and because, you know, we're here and we're very lucky, we know how lovely it is for your health and your well-being to be living here. But in a way, unfortunately, far too many other people have found out about it, and it has had a real impact in various markets. So first of all, you know, we've had the impact of private landlords recognising the fact that they can get more money by evicting long-term tenants, and that's been a particular issue. which, you know, we're having to deal with, and then putting their house out to a different market, and that is, you know, the holiday maker, which we welcome, but the balance in our communities is absolutely wrong for a lot of our communities. So Ollie Monk, who's the portfolio holder for housing, what he's he's doing is, what we want to do is introduce sensible small developments around our towns and villages that complement that community. We're not looking to bring out to our villages large whole-scale development. We want small, bespoke. We also want to be looking very carefully at where we can allocate key worker accommodation, because we recognise without our key workers, you know, a lot of our services are going to fail. So that's the priority for us. Ollie Monk, our portfolio holder, so I'll just refer to him as Ollie now. He's working hard with the cabinet to get some immediate housing delivered, which is what we call temporary, but it's what we call move on accommodation, so that it's much better than for people being homeless, or for people who are really concerned because they've been served with eviction notices. So they can go into this accommodation while we start to build out. And as you've quite rightly said, Claire, we can't address this overnight, but we are looking very carefully now at sites around Cornwall where we're talking to farmers who've got land they want to, that they're happy to let us have, so we can start developing out. And then also when we're looking at planning applications, it's absolutely important that we're looking at that element of affordable housing. And then I don't want to get into that phrase affordable housing, because what's affordable to one person is not affordable to another. But it's absolutely just trying to get the balance, Claire, on making housing available, and to a certain extent, this authority, this Conservative administration, we're using the words, let's see if we can go back to traditional council housing, where, you know, we're building quality housing that residents can go in and be absolutely comfortable and safe, that they've got security of tenancy, and that is also an important element. So I've come up with a lot of things that we're aiming to do, and we will start delivering, Claire, but it can't happen overnight. But I think the most important thing, you know, we're talking to anybody who's got a bit of land, you know, we're talking to Trellis, because there's land there, to see what we can do to absolutely, and Kate's just put a huge like War and Peace there about yeah, I'm just quickly seeing as well that the Landgarth scheme that's coming in at Truro, there is going to be an absolute significant opportunity for key worker accommodation to be built out there. And that is absolutely pivotal as well towards our carbon commitment, because people are going to be able to live in good quality, hopefully, key worker accommodation at Landgarth, and possibly catch the bus or even walk to work. I mean, how good is that? You know, looking forward to the future. So we've got our Treveth, which is our own development company, and you know, they're actually charged in playing a pivotal role in developing out our housing strategy. A lot of words there, Claire, and I think Ollie, my portfolio holder, keeps saying, I want to see shovels in the ground. He's desperate to see shovels in the ground, and we are as well. So I'm going to hand over to Kate to give some sense on the care and the vacancies. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the work we're doing together in respect of labour and workforce, I mean, I think that more often than not, some of the challenges that are facing the health and care system are not always about money. They're often about having people. So, you know, the work on the Health and Care Academy and skills routes, really important. How together we're looking at using some of the short-term funds that are coming down to the NHS in terms of creating the right training and development opportunities, and maybe also retention payments. But you know, at the heart of this, though, we have a whole range of different providers that are paying different rates of pay and often even those that are paying not an hourly rate but a guaranteed rate, including training time and travel time, £11.50 an hour, more than you can earn in supermarkets, are still facing the same issues. So I think that there is something about the value that we place as a society on people that work in care, and how we stitch and we create together the right care pathways. I feel very passionately about this. I started my local government career as a home carer, and it opened up some great career pathways for me. And I'm very keen to share that story, share that experience, and make sure that together we are valuing the work that carers do in a really meaningful way. And I know you're committed to that too. So what we're finding in terms of, I think, some of the pressures that people are talking to us about accommodation is around people needing some short-term accommodation to help them relocate into Cornwall. And I put the link into some modular housing so that people can take a job up whilst they then can interface with what the market is able to offer. And hopefully that will help address for those people who can afford a property on the open market. But we are absolutely committed in terms of that piece of affordable housing, council housing, for those people that are working really hard in valued jobs, but that salary isn't enough to enable people to have a home of their own that they buy, that they've got the security through a decent home into the future. But I think we've got a lot to do. We're not alone on labour shortages. I think this is going to be our wicked issue for the integrated care system to work with together on.
And Claire, if I may as well, Kate referred earlier on that we're hoping to hear about our county deal, and part of that county deal is asks that I call it my Christmas wish list of where I'm hoping that we can get some intervention from central government that will allow Cornwall Council to set some of its own policies in relation to second homes, which we absolutely welcome, but we need to understand where they are within our community and perhaps be asking that they contribute more towards the expenditure that we have in Cornwall, and also looking to see about where we can possibly understand where all our Airbnbs are, so that they could be licensed and we know what's happening in our community. And the other thing that I would like is that if somebody was changing their home from a residential to a holiday let, one of the things I'm asking for is done through a change of use, so that it would go through the planning. So we've got lots that we're wanting to implement, Claire. We obviously need that support from central government, but this cabinet and this administration is absolutely determined. We're going to do whatever we can to ensure that housing becomes not just a luxury, but is there for everyone. And it's incredibly important for our residents that they can absolutely think to themselves, I'm going to have a secure roof over my head in whatever form. So I can't promise you a house tomorrow, Claire, but we're absolutely working on making sure that we make a difference. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic to hear, and particularly about some of Kate's comments about the value that we put on care in our society. As often these are some of the lowest paid workers, accepting that there is absolutely a range, and when they're not there, the impact on people's health and well-being is significant, and you see that start to come through. So it's fantastic to hear the commitment to the expansion of home care and addressing some of the accommodation challenges for key workers particularly. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So I'm now going to bring in Rob Neal from Chasewater. Rob, good evening. How are you?
Brilliant, Linda. Thanks very much. Can I thank you David and Kate for their responses to the various questions this evening, and it's been really eye-opening this evening for me. I did read the whole of the draft budget myself because I was up in Norfolk looking after parents for a while. I needed something to do, and it was enlightening. I come from the community perspective. Not only am I part of Chasebourne Parish Council, but I'm part of Mining Villages. I represent on 2 community network panels as well. If I may just start off by saying that my question is probably mostly all about partnerships as much as anything else. And you mentioned earlier on about the waste and recycling and all that type of stuff. Well, I can tell you now, having spent 2 weeks in another county, just how fortunate we are to have such a service we've got. And it goes back a long, long way for me. Through the whole of lockdown, Biffa and Cormac, whoever's come out to respond to our issues in a plethora of communities in the rural area, we couldn't have complained about the service we've been getting. It's been absolutely brilliant, and you have to go somewhere else to sometimes appreciate what it is we get.
Well, thank you for that, Rob. We'll make sure that that gets passed on. Thank you.
Please do, please do. On the flip side of that, short-term partnerships, and I'm probably talking about one that we can create with the likes of Highways England, for example. You gave lots of reassurances so that we're determined to get things done and stuff like that, and I appreciate that, and I absolutely accept that the commitment is there. The Highways England designated funding has always concerned me for a long time, and how it all came about. And we had £29 million worth, and what I would like to know is where we get the assurance that we've got the resources in place to make sure we hold organisations like that to account, to make sure that they do deliver the 17 environmental projects that came with the designated funding package. I know it's been tough because trying to get land off people to make a Saints Trail, for example, is a tough thing to do. But it's the subordinate tasks, the other 17 little tasks that we said that we were going to deliver weren't necessarily delivered. But I think it's history now. I just want sort of reassurances on behalf of the rural communities that actually when we engage in organisations like that, we've got the resource in place to monitor things, to make sure they are driven through. Thanks very much indeed.
So I'm going to invite Tracy to come in on that one, if I may. And Rob, I acknowledge what you've said, and I thank you for what's happened has happened. And we're looking at a new dawn, and with Tracy just about to explain how, I'm going to hand over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. And I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that we do a wide range of things across a wide range of parts of our community with a wide range of partners, and making sure that we do what we say we're going to do when we say we're going to do it is really important. So part of that is about making sure that we've got the systems and processes in place to ensure that we can give that assurance, which I think is the thing that you're alluding to. What we haven't been, cards on the table, what we haven't been very good at is recognizing that there's some money coming in. Someone wants to give us a load of money or ask us to do a load of stuff, and then be really precise about what it's going to take to deliver it. And I think that we need to get much better at that. So hopefully our new processes for so Linda talked about our outcomes. How we deliver those outcomes is really important, and being really clear about what it is that we need to do in order to deliver them are important. And then being really precise about the things that we're going to do. So what schemes, what money are we spending, how much resource are we going to allocate to delivering them, and then how do we monitor and ensure that through a performance mechanism. So we are changing all of that to make sure that we performance manage the life out of everything that we do, to make sure that we give the value for money that our members are asking us to deliver. So look, I mean, we're not going to be 100% brilliant at everything, but we're going to try our very, very best to make sure that we performance manage the things that we are saying we're going to deliver. And that's going to take a change of culture as well. So a change of the way that we do things in our organisation, and that's a really tricky thing for our people in our organisation who have been doing the same thing the same way for a very long time.
No, I appreciate that very much indeed. That's exactly the type of answer I was hoping for. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I think David wants to come in. David, on that one.
I think Tracy's just actually said most of what I was going to say. I referred to it earlier. It's all right coming out with wonderful budgets and management plans. It's making sure we can monitor them in real time and making sure stuff is delivered in real time. And Rob, if we can't, they'll be carrying me out in a box, because it's something I am desperate to make sure we do, and we get real, up-to-date reporting on not just numbers. I mean, I'm a numbers man, but on delivery and projects, and making sure projects are coming in on time. And if it's a problem, we find out about them today, not in 6 months' time. So that,
make sure we deliver then, David. We don't want you carried out in a box.
Well, we're working on that, Kate, right now.
Or me in the same box with you, David.
Don't start rumours going, Tracy. Thank you.
And I think, Rob, it goes back to our absolute basic that every pound has to work hard in Cornwall, and the processes that Tracy's implementing is absolutely going to help us make sure that every pound is spent well within Cornwall, and we can account for it. So
thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I'm not seeing any more hands going up.
Gin time.
So, yes, Millie, come on down.
Sorry, so I'm back in again. You asked for your facilitator, Dirk, to provide the link to the online dashboard. That hasn't been put in the box. Could we have that, please?
I'll do it for you.
I will put it in the box, and I will also circulate it with the slides. And again, there will be a link in the slides, but I will circulate them straight after the meeting, so you can have a look at those.
Lovely. Thank you.
Right, I'm not seeing any more hands going up. So I'll let you all get back in your cars and drive back home to your comfortable, warm living rooms. I just, well, from David and my point of view, we just want to say thank you for being here tonight and for asking your questions. It may be that you get back home and you close that front door and you think to yourself, oh, I wish I'd asked about that. David and I are absolutely happy to have emails from you. Yes, David. And we might not be able to give you the answer straight away, but we will come back to you. So for anybody, on this call tonight, and also when we've spoken a lot about partnership, we're absolutely open as well to hearing from anybody who's got some ideas, especially if someone's got a bit of land where we can start getting our shovels in. These are the conversations we want to be having with everybody. So David, who will now look surprised again, we will welcome those emails, and we look forward to some new partnership working. So Kate, did you want to say anything to wrap up?
Only to thank colleagues for giving us some time this evening to comment in on our budget and our business plan, and we look forward to working with you to make it a reality.
And Tracy?
No, I think we've said everything. David said everything that I needed to say. And
David?
I do welcome emails, really. I might even answer them as well. All right. But right now it's time for gin. So thank you.
So look, can I say good night to everybody and thank you very much. And perhaps David, Tracy and Kate, we can just stay on a bit and just have a quick debrief. So Hugh, nice to meet you, by the way, and you, Millie, and you, Rob, okay? And Robin, Thanks. If you've not gone home, lovely to see you as well tonight, okay? Oh, right, lovely. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.